and go, and then get the live stream going. Okay, I think it should be going now. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So hi everyone, my name is Kiyomi Knox and I'm the Community and Family Outreach Coordinator here at Center of Life. And then with me, I also have my program assistant and she can go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is DaVonne Fuller. As Kiyomi stated, I'm the Family and Community Engagement Assistant to the program, and we're just happy to have everyone here.
So we wanted to bring this all-star cast of local leaders to you today to talk about voter education. So I know there's a lot of confusion right now on how can we vote and where do we vote and sort of what that process looks like and what's going to be open. But two, we want to talk about why voting really matters and why your voice matters. So we brought this all-star cast to you today. Just to answer some of those questions. I'm gonna go ahead and let them introduce themselves while I take care of a couple technical difficulties. So how about we start with Mr. Curt Conrad? Would you like to go first?
Thanks, Kiyomi. Hi, my name is Curt Conrad. I'm the Chief of Staff for Councilman O'Connor in the city of Pittsburgh. Councilman O'Connor represents the 5th Council District, which includes Hazelwood, but it also includes Greenfield, Lincoln Place, Glen Hazel, New Homestead, Hayes, and South Squirrel Hill. And thank you all for having me.
Okay, and then how about we have the amazing Miracle with us with One Hood Media. Oh, somebody mom says hi, Curt. So hello. we have fans in the chat saying us doing shout outs to Curt. So we have Miracle with One Hood Media.
Hi everyone, my name is Miracle Jones. I'm the Director of Policy at One Hood Media and the Director of Legislative Affairs at One Hood Power. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Here at One Hood, we are a social justice arts organization that uses arts and music to promote and push for social justice. And we also do a lot of voter engagement, education, and empowerment through One Hood Power, and we're very excited and happy to be here to talk with you all this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miracle. How about our CEO, Pastor Tim Smith? Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Smith, and with Center of Life. And we here at Center of Life, we do music and arts, education, athletics, family strengthening, community partnerships. We do a lot of activism around here in education, of course. And of course, since the pandemic, we've had to pivot a little bit. And so we're doing food, and we are doing the, what do they call it? The community education hub for the kids. So, you know, we're just here and doing the best we can. We're glad to be a part of the discussion. I think this is a very important discussion, and I'm hoping that we can help to shed some light on a very important topic. Thanks. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Okay, and then how about we move next to Aerion with, oh, just a second, I lost my notes, apologize.
All voting is local.
All voting is local, yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kiyomi, appreciate that. Yeah, good evening, thank you all for having us. As Pastor Smith said, this is a very critical conversation, so thank you for Center of Life for creating this space and this platform to speak to your constituents. My name, again, is Aerion Abney. I am the Director of Special Projects with All Voting is Local Pennsylvania. We are a nonpartisan voting rights advocacy group that really focuses on trying to expand access to the ballot for all voters, and really trying to break down a lot of the systemic discriminatory barriers that exist for people, especially in Black and Brown communities and other historically disenfranchised communities, limiting their access to voting. Kind of what that looks like for us is we work directly with elections officials, both at the state and the county level, to offer best practices, to offer technical assistance. We also work with other voting advocacy groups across the state on different programming initiatives, as well as we do some general voter engagement and outreach. So again, happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much for being here. Okay, and then two, we have Sharon with Veeam. If you don't mind introducing yourself and talking a little bit about Veeam.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sharon Bodia DDP. I am the community organizer for Veeam, that is Voter Empowerment, Education, and Enrichment Movement. And right now we're busy during this election season. This is our first presidential election that we are boots on the ground, registering people, making sure that their voices are heard in terms of what they are empowered to do with those that are felons or ex-felons, returning citizens, and how they may vote. So thank you for inviting us and having us here this evening. We're really excited to be here and to share with you our education and what we know.
Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you here. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Councilperson Bethany Hallam, who's also going to be leading our voter education piece.
Thank you so much. My name is Bethany Hallam. I am the Allegheny County Councilperson at Large, which I know is kind of a mouthful, but basically what that means is I am the council member on Allegheny County Council that represents the entire county. So all 1.3 million people, regardless of where you live in Allegheny County, I'm your council member. And in addition to that, the Allegheny County Council, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the legislative body of Allegheny County. So the way I like to explain it is that Allegheny County Council is like the Congress of Allegheny County, and the county executive is like the president of Allegheny County. So we're responsible for legislating, for writing laws to be implemented at the county level. And I'm also on the Allegheny County Board of Elections. So since we're talking about elections tonight, I figured that was really appropriate as well. And that role is exactly what it sounds like. Each county has its own board of elections because counties are run at elections are run at the county level. So we ensure that we have plans in place for how you can vote, where you can vote, making sure all your polling places are open, and making sure that if you decide to vote by mail, you get that ballot and it gets returned to us on time. So both hats I'm wearing here tonight.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate how you explained that. If we have everybody introduced, we'll go ahead, and if you don't mind, we'll go right into the educational piece.
Awesome, so that's me. So really, it's so important that everyone always asks, how do I vote, right? And so I think it's important that we eliminate barriers and that everybody understands not only how to vote, but also why your vote is so important, not just for the president, but for every election that's on your ballot. First of all, I want to start off by reminding people that we don't just vote once every 4 years for president. We don't even just vote once every year. There are 2 elections held every single year. In May, if it's a non-presidential year election, we have the primary election. And so that is when, regardless of if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you are voting for the best candidate for each race of your own political party. So in the primary, you won't see candidates from another political party other than yours on your ballot. And then when we go on to November in the general election, that is when you're deciding which candidate you want out of all the political parties that are on there. And believe it or not, even though we always only hear about 2 of them, there are many political parties out there. And even though the other ones aren't able to be on the ballot in the primary, all of the candidates for the different political parties are on your ballot in the general election. So that's just what I want to start out off with, to remind you that just because we're doing this year, just because this is a presidential year, there are 2 elections every single year that you're eligible to vote in. So we should start off by talking about registering to vote and how to register to vote. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to drop the link in the chat for a website called votespa.com. So now this website has everything you can want to know about voting. If you have a question about voting, the Vote Spa, as I like to call it, is where you can go to get all those answers. So the link that I just posted is the specific location on votespa.com where you can register to vote. Remember that in order to be registered to vote, you don't even have to be 18 yet to register. You just have to be turning 18 before the next election. So if you are trying to register to vote in September, you're only 17, but you'll be turning 18 by the time the November election comes around. You are eligible to vote in September. So something to think about. Also, something that I hear so often whenever I'm out knocking doors and talking to members of the community, I have a felony conviction. I can't register to vote. That is not true. And if you take one important thing away from everything that we talk about tonight, it should be that. In Pennsylvania, a felony conviction does not mean that you're not eligible to vote. In my opinion, it should mean that you want to vote that much more because you want to change the system that landed you with a felony conviction in the first place. So really important to remember that. Also in Pennsylvania, lots of folks who are currently incarcerated are also eligible to vote. Remember, in the Allegheny County Jail, 81% of the people who are sitting in that jail have not yet been convicted of a crime. They're either awaiting trial or they're incarcerated for a probation violation, things such as that. If you are not currently serving a felony sentence, you are eligible to vote in Pennsylvania, even while you're still in jail. So I often hear people say, if you have your feet on the street, you're eligible to vote no matter what. Well, even if you don't, even if you're still sitting in jail or even the state penitentiary, depending on what your charges are, you can vote. As long as you are not serving a felony conviction, you're eligible to vote, even if you're still currently incarcerated. So tell all your friends, because that's something, because it varies from state by state, a lot of people don't know is true in Pennsylvania. So now, you got the link to register to vote. So what's next? You submit your voter registration. The deadline to vote in the November 3rd general election is October 19th. That is literally this coming Monday. So if you've been sitting around and saying, I should register to vote, now is the perfect time to do it. And I don't even mind if you click on the link and do it while I'm talking, because that is so much more important. Please go do it right now before Monday's deadline. The next thing is, okay, now I'm registered. How do I vote? I think that was a question I saw in the chat as well. That's a great question. And in Pennsylvania, for the first time, we have so many options for how you can vote. So last year, there was a piece of legislation passed at the state level called Act 77. What it did was allowed for any registered voter in all of Pennsylvania to vote by mail without any excuse for doing so. So if it's because of COVID and you don't want to have to go out and wait in line in your polling place, you can vote by mail. If it's because you are working all day on election day, or you can't get childcare for election day to get to the polls, you can vote by mail. If you're just like me and just don't want to have to leave your house on election day, you can vote by mail. And this is all brand new, as you can tell by my face. I'm so excited about it, that we have made voting so much easier for so many people. We've eliminated that barrier to voting. You don't have to leave your house. Your mail-in ballot comes with prepaid postage, so you don't even need to find a stamp. You can get your ballot mailed to you, fill it out, and put it right back in your mailbox to send it back. So if that's the way that you want to vote, I have another link for you that I'm dropping in the chat right now. This is the link to apply for your mail-in ballot. Again, you can go online. You need to have a Pennsylvania state ID or driver's license, and you have to use that number to apply for a mail-in ballot online. If you do not have a Pennsylvania ID or driver's license, you can fill out a paper application, which in Allegheny County, every registered voter had a paper application for mail-in voting sent to their house already. So if you don't have an ID, don't worry. You can actually apply for a mail-in ballot via your social security number on the paper ballot. So that's another way that you can vote. A really cool addition to that again, this is the first election we're going to have it, is if you decide you want to get a ballot sent to your house, but you are a little worried about sending it back in the mail, will it get there on time? We now have drop boxes all throughout the county that you can take your completed mail-in ballot to a drop box. The ones that are coming up this coming weekend are at the county office building, which is downtown on Forbes Avenue, the South Park Ice Skating Rink, CCAC South, that's the CCAC campus out in West Mifflin, Boyce Park Ski Lodge, and the Shop and Save in the Hill District. So all of those locations, you can show up Saturday or Sunday, drop off your completed mail-in ballot. Now, if that's what you're deciding to do, whether you're going to send it in the mail or go to one of the satellite voting locations and drop it off in the drop box, there are some really important steps to make sure that your mail-in ballot is counted. The very first thing is you need to fill out your ballot with blue or black pen. So don't use red pen, don't use a pencil. The second thing is you need to fill in the ovals completely. So you'll see ovals next to each candidate. Don't put an X on them. Don't put a line through it. Make sure you fill it in completely with your blue or black pen. The next step is you take your ballot and you place it inside what's called a secrecy envelope. This part is so important. I cannot stress it enough. You may have heard the term naked ballots being thrown around lately and wondering, how can a ballot be naked? Well, I'm going to tell you, if you forget to use that secrecy envelope that's inside the declaration envelope, your vote will not be counted. So make sure that as soon as you fill out your ballot, you place it in that secrecy envelope and seal it, because we don't want any naked ballots here in Allegheny County. The next step is to place your secrecy envelope into the outer declaration envelope. You'll know it's the declaration envelope because it's the envelope that comes with prepaid postage and is addressed to the Allegheny County Elections Division. Once you put your ballot in the envelope, in the outer envelope, and seal it, you'll fill out what's called a voter declaration on the back of the declaration envelope. That's where you'll sign your name, date it with today's date, whatever date you're filling it out, and put your address. Basically what you're saying with your voter declaration is, this is my ballot, I filled it out, and I'm signing to say that it was me who did that. So that's a really, really important thing that you remember, is that if you forget to sign your ballot, if you forget the inner secrecy envelope and send in a naked ballot, if you fill out your ballot with pencil or a different colored pen, your vote won't be counted. And the whole point of this tonight is to make sure that everybody's vote is counted. So if you make sure that you follow those really important steps, your vote will be counted and you will be able to participate in democracy. And I don't know what's more exciting than that. If you decide that you don't want to vote by mail, like I said, you have so many options for this election. You can, as always, go and vote in person at your polling place. So there are 1,323 voting precincts in Allegheny County, a little under 900 unique locations. So every person is assigned a polling place based off of where you live. You can go online and figure out where your polling place is via the polling place locator, which is the next link that I'm dropping into the chat. So if you type in your information, it'll tell you exactly where you need to go if you want to cast an in-person vote on Election Day. Remember that Election Day is November 3rd, and that's a Tuesday. The polls are open from 7 a.m. until 8 p.m. If you get there close to 8 p.m. and you're worried you're not going to make it, it's okay, because as long as you are in line by the time the polls close, you have the right to vote. So if you get there at 7:59 and 59 seconds, as long as you're there before 8 p.m., stay in line until you cast your ballot. There's the potential for lines at the polling place, so as long as you're in line, you're going to be okay. Another option for voting in person is at the satellite voting locations. So that list of places that I just told you that you can drop off your completed mail-in ballot, you can also, if you haven't requested a mail-in ballot, go to any of those locations and do what's called in-person absentee voting. A lot of people like to call it over-the-counter voting. I think that's a much better way to explain it, because that's exactly what you're doing. You show up to one of the satellite voting locations and you say, I would like to vote. So what that is it's really a one-stop shop for mail-in voting without the mail. So you apply for your mail-in ballot, you get approved for your mail-in ballot on the spot, you go and fill out your mail-in ballot, and then you submit your mail-in ballot all in one stop. It's about a 10 to 15 minute process to do this method of voting. So it's not as quick as if you would go in person at your polling place, but it does save you the potential for having to wait in line at your polling place. If something comes up on November 3rd and you can't make it to vote, you already have your vote counted because you went to one of these satellite voting locations ahead of the election. So I already listed this weekend's locations. On Saturday, those locations are open from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. On Sunday, they're open from 11 a.m. till 7 p.m. If you don't think you're available to do it this weekend, you still have one more weekend left. Next weekend, the 24th and 25th, you can go to the county office building, Boyce Park Ski Lodge, CCAC South, that's the one in West Mifflin, CCAC Allegheny, that's the one on the north side, or the North Park Ice Rink. Same hours, Saturday 9 to 5, Sunday 11 to 7. So there's all your options for how you can vote in this election. In person on Election Day, in person at a satellite voting location, by mail, where you just vote and then send it back in the mail, or by mail where you drop your completed ballot off at one of the drop boxes at the satellite voting locations. So I know it sounds like a lot, but really all it is so many options. And I have a lot of people ask me, what is the best option? You mentioned so many different ones. How should I know which option is best for me? But that's the best part about this all, is there isn't a best option for everyone. It's up to you to decide which method of voting is the most convenient for you, you feel the most safe doing so, and you have the confidence that your vote will be counted. So whatever way sounds like the best option for you, that is the best option for you. So I know that sounds like a lot again, but be sure that all of this information is readily available online as well. I know I would be more than happy to answer any questions that anybody has about how to vote or where to vote. So the next thing is about going over what you're worried about with mail-in voting. I hear all the time, and any of you that have been on social media, I'm sure, have seen people say, I don't trust voting by mail, I want to go and vote in person. There are so many security measures in place to be sure that, first of all, no one can use mail-in voting fraudulently. So no one can vote by mail. Even if they get 50 ballots, they can only vote once. The reason for that is because every voter is assigned a unique voter ID. It's literally a barcode and a number that is attached to only you. So what that allows for is to make sure that you don't vote by mail and then try to go vote in person, vote by mail more than once, vote at a satellite voting location and then go in person. It keeps track of you, and it's instant. So as soon as you cast a vote via any of the methods that we talked, about, you are marked as having voted. A really important thing to remember about that is, as soon as you request a mail-in ballot, even if you change your mind and decide you want to go vote in person, you are going to be marked as having voted, even if you never send that mail-in ballot in. So I've heard from a lot of people who have said they requested mail-in ballots and changed their mind. They're just going to go on November 3rd to their polling place. When you get there, you're going to have them tell you, the poll worker is going to say, sorry, we already have you marked as having voted by mail. Again, even if you didn't, as soon as you request that mail-in ballot, you're marked as having voted. So if this sounds like you, and that's an option that you're considering, it is so, so important that you take your entire ballot package to the poll with you on November 3rd. So that's all the pieces we talked about, the ballot, the secrecy envelope, and the declaration envelope. You have to take all of those pieces to your polling place with you on November 3rd. The poll worker will spoil your ballot and you'll be able to vote in person normally. If you show up at your polling place without those three very important pieces, they're going to tell you that you have to vote provisionally. So a provisional vote should be your absolute last case resort. But at the same time, don't ever leave your polling place without having cast the vote. So if they tell you that you cannot vote regularly in person, you have the right to demand a provisional ballot. You'll have to sign an affidavit saying that you did not vote any other method in this election, that this is the first time you're voting, and you'll fill out a provisional ballot. What happens then is elections division workers over the next 7 days will go through all the provisional ballots and make sure that each one that was cast was eligible to vote in that district. They'll make sure you didn't already vote by mail. They'll make sure that you didn't vote at a different polling place. They'll make sure that you didn't vote at a satellite voting location. So again, that provisional ballot should be an absolute last case resort, but never ever go home from your polling place without, at the very least, casting a provisional ballot. We want to make sure that everybody's vote is counted, and following these instructions is the absolute best way to do that. So next, I'm going to go into what is on the ballot on November 3rd, or what is on the ballot if you have filled out a mail-in ballot. You're going to see more than just presidential election, even though that's what we're hearing everybody talk about right now. There are always more than one, there's always more than one race on the ballot in a regular election cycle. So the first thing you're going to see at the top of your ballot is going to be the presidential election. The next thing that you're going to see on your ballot is going to be 3 statewide offices. We call them row offices. Don't ask me why. I have no idea either. That's just what they call them. So the 3 statewide offices that's on everybody's ballot is going to be the race for Attorney General, the race for Auditor General, and the race for Treasurer. The next thing that's going to be on your ballot, regardless of where you live, is going to be a congressional election. That's your U.S. Congressperson that represents you and your district in the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives. So again, how I mentioned earlier, I'm on County Council, which is the legislative body of Allegheny County. The U.S. Congress is the legislative body of the entire country. So really important as well. The next race that's on your ballot, and depending on where you live, will depend if you have this race on your ballot, is a state Senate race. So unlike U.S. Congress, that you vote them in and out every 2 years, the state Senate races are 4-year terms, and it's alternating. So basically, the best way to understand it is half of the voters in Allegheny County will have a state Senate race on their ballot. The other half of voters in Allegheny County will have a state Senate race on their ballot in 2 more years. The next race that will be on your ballot, and this is the last one, I promise, is going to be for state representative. So we talked about the U.S. Congress at the national level. Well, a state representative is the legislative body of the state level. So they're voting on state issues as opposed to federal, national issues like the US Congress is. Those seats are also up every 2 years. So no matter where you live, you will have a state representative race on your ballot as well. The next thing is really important and actually kind of unique for this election. If you live in the city of Pittsburgh, and only if you live in the city of Pittsburgh, you're going to have what's called a ballot referendum on your ballot. So what that is it's a question. As opposed to picking between 2 or 3 or 4 candidates, you're going to have a yes or a no. So many people may be familiar with the Independent Police Review Board that the city of Pittsburgh has. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a board that is independent from city council or the mayor, a board that investigates police misconduct, accusations of abuse of force by police officers, things such as that. So the Police Review Board already exists in the city of Pittsburgh. What this question is asking you is if you think the Police Review Board should have more authority than it currently has. So this is a board, again, an independent agency. It's made up of 7 people. So the question that you're going to see on your ballot if you live in the city of Pittsburgh is whether or not the home rule charter should be amended to allow the board to require police officers to participate in investigations, conducting performance audits of the police bureau, in preventing the removal of board members except for just cause and with city council approval. Now, if you're like me, that sounds like a whole lot of legal jargon. So I'm going to break it down a little bit more for you. So what I would argue is a very important aspect of this question is that if you vote yes, what you're saying is that the Pittsburgh police officers should be mandated to cooperate with the Police Review Board's investigations. So right now, if there is an allegation of misconduct, abuse of force, anything like that, that's reported to the Police Review Board, they don't currently have any power to force the police officers who the accusations are against to participate in any hearings. I like to imagine it as like a hearing for a police officer, and the 7-member Police Review Board is like the judge and the jury. So currently they are not required to participate in these proceedings. If you vote yes, what you're saying is that you agree that the authority of the Police Review Board should be expanded to require police to participate, to make the police bureau have to wait until a ruling is handed down by the Police Review Board about any disciplinary situation, and also that a board member can only be removed by the mayor if there is any allegation of conflict of interest or misconduct by a board member. If you say no, basically what you're saying is that you disagree with the question proposed and you do not think that the Police Review Board should have expanded authority over the Pittsburgh police officers. So I know that sounds like a whole lot, but it's a really important question because there are certain pieces of legislation. This one was unanimously passed by the Pittsburgh City Council. There are certain pieces of legislation that because they actually change what's called the Home Rule Charter, they have to be voted on by the voters. I think it's an awesome method because then as opposed to just your elected officials making decisions about legislation, you as a voter actually have a say in legislation that is implemented. So it's really important that you look over the question, do a little research if you have the opportunity to, and figure out if you think you should vote yes to expand the powers of the Police Review Board in Pittsburgh or no to keep the powers the way that they are currently. So I definitely don't want to continue going any further. If anyone has any questions and ahead of the voter engagement piece, Kayomi, if you want to open it up for questions or if you want to continue on to the next piece, totally up to you.
Sure. So we actually do have a couple series of questions, which I find really exciting. So one of the questions was regarding the mail-in ballot. And I know that we talked about, you're able to take it in person to one of those satellite sites or elsewhere. But the situation was, so this person opened their ballot, they filled out their ballot, they put it in the secrecy envelope, put it in a prepaid envelope, signed the outer envelope, but did not mail it yet. And they're wondering, can I still bring my ballot to the poll place to vote in person? Does the ballot have to be blank in order to be spoiled?
That's a great question. It does not have to be blank to be spoiled, but also remember that in addition to being able to spoil it, you can also take it to one of the satellite locations and drop it off and not even have to go and vote in person at your polling place on November 3rd. But if that is something that you've already decided that you want to do, again, that is totally up to you. Just as long as you take all three pieces, regardless of if they're blank or not, you will be able to spoil your ballot and vote in person.
Thank you so much. Another question that we have is actually around being a poll worker. So one individual had applied to be a poll worker online and they haven't heard back from anyone, but they weren't sure who they might be able to reach out to. I'm not sure if you have information about that.
Yeah, so you can always reach out to the Allegheny County Elections Division. I will tell you that we did hit the number of poll workers that we needed. So believe it or not, it takes 6,600 poll workers to staff one election in Allegheny County because we have so many different precincts, so many different polling places. So if you applied to be a poll worker and didn't hear back, it is most likely because they don't have any available spots left. If you want to reach out and double check and maybe just put yourself on like a waiting list to be a poll worker in case one's needed last minute, you can email electionscontact@alleghenycounty.us. So I'm actually going to type that in the chat right now, just so anybody who wants to reach out has it. It's electionscontact@alleghenycounty.us. So it's a perfect resource. I know many people have been trying to call Elections Division. Their number is 412-350-4500. It is also in the chat as well. Good luck getting through because everyone is calling Elections Division right now. If you do reach out and use the email address that was provided, they're super responsive about that. But to answer your specific question, more likely than not, they will not need you this election, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply for next election and the one after that as well. We always use this language volunteer to be a poll worker, but in reality, you do actually get paid for the day and the time that you serve being a poll worker in Allegheny County.
Thank you so much. Another question that we have is, how can people make sure their loved ones in jail are able to exercise their right to vote?
That is an awesome question. So I have been doing a lot of work on this, specifically at the Allegheny County level. I know Aerion and All Voting is Local has been working on that as well. So the first thing I would do is to make sure that your loved one who is currently incarcerated, and honestly, they don't need to be incarcerated in the Allegheny County Jail, wherever they're incarcerated, make sure that they know about the deadlines for voting by mail. There isn't just a polling place that folks in jail can go to. So they have always voted via an absentee ballot, which is really just a mail-in ballot when you have an actual reason why you can't go to your poll. So I would definitely start by next time you talk to them, letting them know that the deadline to apply for a mail-in ballot is October 27th. That deadline is right around the corner. So I first want to make sure you let them know. Second of all, at least at the Allegheny County Jail, they have caseworkers who are going around to each pod and making sure that anyone who's currently incarcerated who is eligible to vote, remember that's anyone who's not currently serving a felony sentence there, remind people that they're eligible to vote and to ask them if they would like to fill out a mail-in ballot application. At the Allegheny County Jail, we recently got tablets for all of the folks who are incarcerated there. So if that's where your loved one is incarcerated, they might have told you about that they recently got tablets. We were working to get a portal on the tablets to be able to apply for a mail-in ballot via the tablet, but it just didn't happen quickly enough. So the caseworkers are going around to each pod. At the very least, as a last step, they can ask the corrections officer sitting at the desk on their pod if they can have a mail-in ballot application. So it will be a paper application. They'll fill it out, send it into Elections Division. Elections Division will send them a ballot. They'll fill the ballot out, and then they'll send it back to Elections Division. So now that we have no excuse mail-in voting, it's just as simple for them as it is for us. So really important that folks who are incarcerated understand what's on the ballot, why it's so important that we're not just talking about president, we're not just talking about local offices, but all of the ones that are on the ballot. And maybe what I think is really important as well is that folks who are incarcerated have the same access to information that we have. If I want to look up what a candidate stands for, if I want to look up if a candidate is for criminal justice reform, which is something I would care about if I was currently incarcerated, they don't have the ease and access of just going on the internet and searching for information about a candidate. So if you could be their outside resource to let them know everything that you can find online, what each office does, why it's important, why each office is important, and also what each candidate stands for as well, I think that would be a great help to any loved one that's incarcerated.
Thank you so much for that. Another question, it's a little bit more specific to Hazelwood. And Curt, I don't know if maybe you might be able to play into this too, is we have a couple people asking where specifically can they vote in person in Hazelwood? They said that they did try to look it up, but they weren't able to find it.
So I just put in the chat the actual polling place locator. So if you remember in the primary, and I wonder if this is a reason that people are getting a little caught up on this, is because in the primary, we actually consolidated polling locations. Okay, so as opposed to you having the normal number of polling locations that we have in any election year, you only had 10% of polling places that were open in the primary. So the city of Pittsburgh had, I want to say 18 polling places that were open for the entire city, and every other municipality only had one for the entire municipality. So even though your polling place was changed in the primary, the polling place that you're going to go to for this election is the polling place that you went to in all the previous elections. So just to be sure, every single voter in Allegheny County will be receiving a postcard letting you know where your polling place is. So keep your eyes peeled for the postcard. There is the lookup tool that I put in the chat. And also there is a list on the Allegheny County Elections Division website that tells you where all of the polling places are for each ward of the city and each precinct. But if you use that link that was posted in the chat, and Curt actually just posted another link, which is the list that I was referencing with all of the polling places listed, you look up your ward. So you scroll down to Pittsburgh, look up your ward, and then it'll go over to what precinct you live in. You can figure that out if you don't know what precinct you live in by going to the Votes PA links that we have shared earlier in the chat. So again, it shouldn't be as complicated as it is, but because so much has changed this year, everything's a little bit different. But if you know your ward and precinct, you can look at the list. If you don't know your ward and precinct, you can use the PA Voter Services link that I posted that tells you to input your address, so your house number, your street name, the city that you live in, and your zip code. And it'll tell you exactly where you're going to vote. So definitely check that tool out. Worst comes to worst, 14 days out from Election Day, postcards are going to be sent out to every single voter, letting you know exactly where to go on November 3rd.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of that information and presenting it in such an understandable way. I really appreciated that. I think that is all of our questions on the voter educational piece, and certainly anyone that's watching or attending, if I missed any of your questions, please just re-put it in the chat and I'm happy to make sure to bring that back up. So now we're gonna go ahead and put it in gallery view here so we can see all of these wonderful faces. And we're gonna go ahead and just talk about voting in general and why it's important. And so I kind of wanted to bring it up to everybody, and anybody can answer if they would like to, just about, you know, how how do we explain, like bringing it home? Like how and why is voting important to every, individual and every, family? We talked about in terms of like the census, one of the ways that we were able to bring it home is to tell people how much the census impacted them on a personal level. And so we're thinking about, how does voting really impact us on a personal level? And, I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking about the organization name, All Voting and Local, and how powerful that is. And I'm also thinking about Miracle, just to quote you from earlier this week when you were in a panel, you had said that voting is but a tool that we have to ensure that people have their voices heard, and just how powerful that is too. And you also shared the quote that, nobody is free until everybody is free. So I just wanted to offer up this space for anyone in the panel discussion to talk about why they feel, voting is important for everyone that's watching today.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start, and then I guess Aerion can go after me. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't realize how much voting impacts their lives. So how long the school day is, that is determined by like your school board, how many days you get off when your children are going back to school, how much money goes to fix your sidewalks, when your trash days, if you get your blue trash can or your blue trash bag, right? That's something you vote for. But more seriously, in Pennsylvania, your district attorney, your judges, your even all the way up to the Supreme Court, you vote for those individuals. So the people who make the rules, who enforce the rules, and who lobby for the rules that impact your day-to-day lives, you're voting for those people. And that's the same on the national level. I think a lot of times people get, a lot of the focus is based on what's going on in the federal and Congress, but we have our own legislature here in Pennsylvania. People right now are trying to advocate so that hair discrimination is not a thing in the county, so that gender non-discrimination, so that trans and queer and gender non-conforming people have rights and protections within the Commonwealth. These are all things that you have to vote for and you have to vote on. And I know it gets frustrating, like every 2 years, it's literally like this vote or die campaign. And I know a lot of people get overwhelmed and disenfranchised, but voting is a tool that these policies that you like stay in place, and the policies that you have yet to see come to fruition. And so that's why people have to not only vote, but stay involved in policy and political electoral work. And that is very privileged, right? Because a lot of people, they have to work, they have to go to school, to take care of their families. And so they don't have time to caucus and to canvass. And so they do get overwhelmed and disenfranchised. But it's so important that people pick a race, pick a county council person, pick a legislator that speaks to their issues and follow up with them, create those relationships with them so that they can get better policies that will help impact people's lives for the better.
Yeah, I can jump in and just piggyback off of that. So the name All Voting is Local plays off of Tip O'Neill's famous saying of all politics is local, because that just is the reality of it. And voting is really essential to human progress as a whole in our society. And our organization is really trying to lift up voting as a core social institution, the same way that we look at education as important to a functioning society, the same way we look at the financial institution, or we look at economic development, or even we look at the religious institutions as a functioning part of our society. We think that voting is just as critical as all these other institutions. And so it's really important to make sure that you're casting your vote in every election, because these are the people you're voting for. They are passing all of the rules and the laws and the regulations that, whether you like it or not, we are all governed by, right? And so we have to, to deal with them accordingly. And so, you think about the people who are running for office at the federal level, and all the way down to the local level. And, I always hear people say that, hey, I don't necessarily care for the people at the federal level, so I'm not going to vote. But you have to think about the opportunity for you to vote for a school board member, if you care about education, is so critical. For your city council person or your mayor is so critical. And the reality of the fact is, you have a better chance at sitting down, having conversation with County Councilwoman Bethany Hallam than you ever will have with, your U.S. Senator, right? Or you have a better chance of sitting down with Curt from Councilman O'Connor's office, or even Councilman O'Connor, to have a one-on-one conversation with them about the issues that you really care about. And so these are the people who are actually making decisions about your everyday quality of life. And so not only are you voting to have them be in positions to represent your interests, but you also have, better access to them, to have conversations with them, to hold them accountable after you actually vote for them.
I think the only thing that I would add to that I think is really important is I know a lot of folks who aren't really excited about their options for president right now, and that is totally okay. Do not ever let anyone shame you into voting for a candidate or telling you that you're a lesser person if you don't vote. What's really, really important is that your elected officials, your community leaders are taking time out of their day, like tonight, to make sure that you understand why your vote is so important. Why, as Miracle said, your vote is your voice. Why you should be voting, for you to be able to decide what the best option is for you. So even if you're not thrilled about who's on your ballot for president, remember all the other races that Aerion and Miracle talked about that we mentioned today that are on your ballot right now. And remember that a lot of those races, especially the more local races, are often decided by a handful of votes. I hear a lot of people who also don't get excited about voting for president because they know about the Electoral College. And for forever, folks have tried to convince us that our vote doesn't count. But really it does. And the Electoral College is only used for the presidential election. In every other race down the ballot, one person equals one vote. And again, I have seen ties. I have literally seen elections that have resulted in a tie. I have known people, and I'm sure at some point in your life you may meet someone who won or lost an election by one single vote. So imagine if you were that one deciding vote in a race, to have an elected official that really represents you, regardless of at what level that is. Every vote does count, and it's so, so important. So don't get discouraged if you're not excited about all the candidates on your ballot. All you need to find is at least one.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, kind of going off of what Bethany said and what Aerion said, is it is so understandable to feel like your vote is powerless in the presidential race, because your vote is in competition with millions of other people. It's perfectly understandable that folks would feel that way. But on the local level, your vote carries so much more weight because of, as Bethany said, how few votes are out there and how low the turnout can be. So candidates can win with 20% of the vote, and they might get a lot of those votes. They might not be in a competitive race, but that's only 20% of the voting populace. And that's here locally. That's in most recent elections. I believe the last time the mayor was on the ballot, we got, I think, this might be optimistic too, I think we got low 20% turnout. So turnout is part of it, but it's also in those elections, you're talking about a couple thousand, tens of thousands of people voting. So your vote carries a lot of weight on the local level. So if there is a contested race locally, you have a huge say in who gets that seat.
I just wanted to say also that when I went to take my ballot in, how organized it was extremely organized. There was so much information. People met you right as you're walking in. People would meet you and ask you where you were in the process, get you in the right line, get you processed. I was in and out of there in hardly any time at all. There didn't seem to be any confusion. Everybody was well versed, well informed. The people who were giving the information were well informed. So I felt really, I really felt good about, just casting my ballot. And then I did it on a Saturday, and on Monday I got an email saying, everything was straight. So it's really important for people to understand that there are mechanisms in place to make sure that your vote is being counted, and I think we can trust that system.
And if I could add on to that, Pastor Tim, something I forgot to mention earlier that goes off of what you just said. There was a lot of questions about whether you could register to vote and then vote at the same time at the satellite voting locations. That's available in other counties throughout the Commonwealth, but in Allegheny County, if you are not yet registered to vote, you cannot show up to a satellite voting location, register to vote, and then cast the ballot as well. So if you do want to do, as Pastor Tim told us, is an easy, simple way to vote. If you do want to go to one of the satellite locations to do an over-the-counter vote, make sure you register in advance. Give yourself at least 4 or 5 days ahead of the time you plan to go to the satellite location to get your voter registration process so that you do have that option to go and cast the vote early.
And just going off of some of the things that you all mentioned, we want to come back to Electoral College. I believe that DaVonne has a question around that. But then also, we were talking about, what if people aren't thrilled about who they have to vote for? And how might you respond to someone that doesn't want to vote for either party, so they're just not going to vote? They don't like either candidate, so they don't want to vote in general. Or they say that they're going to vote for a third party instead because there's issues with the two-party system. And really, like, what are the detriments of those decisions when they make those?
I mean, that's a hard one, but I'll start if no one else wants to. Miracle, I saw you take your microphone off mute, so I was hoping you were.
Sure, I'll go. Like, listen, so this is a little controversial, and I know sometimes establishment party people get mad at me when I talk about this. I think it is a candidate's responsibility to give people something to vote for. And if people are going to third, fourth, and fifth parties, there is a reason why something is happening. There is a disconnect. And it's up to that party platform, those party officials, to reach out to third and fourth party voters to figure out what is going on. I know a lot of stuff has happened because of misinformation, and that's why I was referencing. Again, it is a privilege to be politically aware. If you were someone who, for instance, came into politics because of Bernie Sanders, but you knew nothing about a caucus system, you knew nothing about a primary system, you are going to come away feeling disenfranchised because you're going to feel like this party machine did something to keep your person out of the race. However, that's what the party machine is supposed to do. And the rules are supposed to be that the party puts up people who are aligned with their platforms, right? And so that conversation has to happen. And I know people like to say Jill Stein spoiled the election in 2016 and different things. Be that as it may, I think that if people are going and say they're not going to vote and they're going to vote for third parties, we need to reach out and say what is happening, because regardless of what's going on with that vote, there is a voter there who's interested in participating, but they feel disenfranchised by something that's going on. So is it that they're not seeing healthcare access? Is it that they lived in like Penn Hills and they're watching their bus system get eroded, year after year? Is it because they live in the Hill District and they don't have a grocery? Is it because they're in Bloomfield and they're watching gentrification impact their community? What is going on that they're not getting involved in traditional methods? And also, I really don't mind third and fourth parties, right? If we're going to talk about being in a free market society, competition is supposed to mean that we all, the best people rise to the top or something like that in economics. And so I think that it's going to happen, but I don't believe in shaming voters. I don't believe in talking down to people. I believe in creating relationships and figure out what is going on. I do think that this election for a lot of people seems to be a make or break election for people's lives, and there is so much going on. And I think that right now we need to be talking to people and figuring out what motivates them to vote and what their concerns are, and showing where in these party platforms their concerns are being met, instead of, disrespecting and pushing people aside. And the last thing I'll say, if you're going to vote, whoever you vote for, you need to be pushing that politician to create better policies for yourself and your community, whoever they are. Just because somebody's from a particular party doesn't mean they have your best interest at heart, or they care about you and your family, taken in the aggregate. So that's what I would say.
I don't really think that there's much to add to that answer, Miracle. I feel like you kind of covered everything that I was thinking as well. The only thing that I would say is that you mentioned this, the complaint that I've heard is, oh, the two-party system isn't working. I mean, I also agree with that. The route that I chose is I ran as a certain political party because I felt out of the two-party system, it was the one that would most closely identified to me. So you will hear a lot of folks doing that, but never should we ever shame someone for registering as a third party or an independent. Although I would argue you should register as the party that most closely aligns for you, because remember earlier when I mentioned that you vote twice a year, every year, if you are not registered as one of the two major parties, Democrat or Republican, you don't get to vote twice a year, every year. You only get to vote once a year, every year. And so that's something to think about as well. But when it comes down to voting for third party candidates, you should vote for whatever candidate inspires you. You should be excited that you have someone on the ballot that does inspire you and motivates you to want to get more involved, because so many people don't have that. So I don't think we should ever shame people who are voting third party. And I agree with Miracle, is that we should instead find out why they feel the need to work outside of the two-party system. Why do neither party speak to them? And then also echoing holding your elected officials accountable. If you do decide to vote for the lesser of two evils in a race that you're not excited about either candidate, don't just vote. Follow up and hold them accountable. You know, elections are a great way to hold an elected official accountable, but there's so many more things that you can do in between elections to hold the candidate that you voted for responsible. Showing up and speaking at public meetings, right? There's an act called the Sunshine Law. There's a law called the Sunshine Law that mandates that governmental meetings be public, be open to the public, accept public comment. Do that. You would not believe how excited I get when I see hundreds of constituents flowing public comments into my email because they are holding me and my counterparts on county council accountable. That goes for school board. I tell kids this all the time. You're not old enough to vote. You are old enough to submit public comment for your school board meeting to talk about what's going on at your school that you're not happy about. So there are a lot of other ways to participate in the process in between voting, in between elections, to hold your elected officials accountable and make sure that they are supporting the ideas that you support. Tell them, I voted for you because I expected you to do this. You told me when you were running that you were going to do this, and now I'm here to make sure you follow through with it. So I think that's a really important aspect as well.
I also think we need to be careful about just having these two buckets of parties, because once upon a time when there were very active and strong political machines, it did mean a lot whether you were Democrat or Republican. I mean, it still means a lot. But think about our primaries this year for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party in 2016, their primaries. You had a full spectrum of candidates who were under this umbrella of a party, but you had everyone from Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders up to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and everyone in between. So I hope folks are not dissuaded just by the letter that comes after a person's name. Really look at the character of the person that's running and the platform that they're running on, because now we're seeing this kind of breaking open of the parties where you're getting a whole spectrum of candidates running. It's not everyone kind of coalescing around the same platform. So it's, look past that. But also, if you are someone who is a libertarian or has a Green Party ideology, you should vote for that person. If that is the person that you want, vote for that person. But what I think is less acceptable is not voting at all. If you remove yourself from the system and decide not to participate, that's a really privileged thing to do. And by doing that, your voice is not being included, obviously, but that system, it cares about you, and it's going to make decisions on your life and everything that happens in your house. And as soon as you walk out the door, the system will be playing a role in your life. So you should be playing a role in it, even if it is an uphill battle because you are from a third-party ideology. But it's important to be involved.
I agree. I think it's very important to be involved. I also think it's important for us, as we get involved, to challenge the existing system as it is, because we have these two main parties, because back in the day, so to speak, it was mostly a white ran kind of thing. But now we have a world, not just a country, but if I don't talk about the world, I can talk about our country and the way it's changed in so many different ways, whether it be in ethnic groups or whether it be gender, whether it be any of those kinds of things. There are so many changes that need to be taken into consideration. I don't think that we can be the country that we really want to be. And I think that's another conversation. What kind of country do we really want to be? You know, with the things that we see happening, you know, many of my constituents feel like they don't have a choice. You know, I feel like I don't have a choice. I have to vote. I feel like I have to vote because, you know, I'm from that generation that, you know, that fought, you know, hard to see civil rights happen. And I believe there was too many sacrifices for me to sit back and not do it. But at the same time, I struggle with the choices that we come down to a lot of times, you know, especially when it comes to the president of the United States. And I think that there are a lot of people that struggle with that. And so I think there, you know, I think DaVonne was going to mention something about the Electoral College, and all those things. I mean, so much of this stuff comes down to people simply disagreeing with each other. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you look real hard at all of the language and all of the writings around the Electoral College, it came down to people who just did not agree. And so they had to figure out how to come up with something, you know, but it ends up favoring those with power and control as opposed to those who don't have power and control a lot of times. And I think that some people would argue that the Electoral College is helpful to keep there from being a runoff, so to speak, you know, like if there's a runoff and all those kinds of things. But even in that situation, every vote is not counted. And I think that, you know, I mean, I absolutely agree with the local argument that locally, you know, our votes are counted, they count for something, they mean something. But people really do want their vote to count for the president, and they want to hold the president accountable. And to watch how things are going now, it's encouraging to see a lot of the young people that are marching for change, for system change, and for policy change, for laws to be changed. I think it's really encouraging. I think it's very disappointing to see what's happening right now, even with the Supreme Court. I think it's extremely disappointing. And you know, to see what people can do when they just don't they're just disagreeing, and and the politics they're playing is with people's lives, you know, big time. And so you know that there's going to be a answer to whatever whatever the Senate does. There's going to be an answer to that when this is all over. You know, it's like a tit and tat, like going back and forth, you know. But the question is, you know, where do the people on the ground, the American people, where do we fit in this whole thing? And that's why it's important to be active. It's important to be informed. It's important to understand what the issues are, to look at the candidates, to understand what their real platform is, to look at their record. Because if you want to know what a person can do, look at what they've done. You know, look at the people who are working with them. Who have they surrounded themselves with? You know, if they have surrounded themselves with people who have no interest in the American people or in the people who actually, you know, make America run, you know, folks who are paying the taxes, the folks who are working hard, or the disenfranchised, the you know, marginalized, then if you've surrounded yourself with people like that, but you want my vote, I'm gonna have a problem with you. So, you know, it's so important, I think, for us to look at all those things. And it's important for us to teach young people coming up under us that don't just look at the candidate, look at who's around the candidate. That's when I'm talking with a corporation, when I'm dealing with a corporation and they want to come to me and talk to me about diversity and inclusion and all that stuff, I want to see what their board looks like. I want to see how many CEOs they've had that look like me or maybe look like somebody else of color. I want to see if they look like women. If I want to see, whatever the case might be. But if they don't have a history, of it, they're not likely to be changing because of any information that I give them, And so, it's just really important for us, all of us, to do our homework and also to help others to be encouraged to research and do their homework, because it's a lot to this.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciated your very honest hot takes on this, right? Because I think that there's a lot of heat. When you see this on social media, people kind of going at each other about, this very specific topic, about like the two-party system and, what does it mean if I vote for a third party and things like that. So I really appreciated your honesty around that. And I also appreciated, Miracle, when you just talked about like the disconnect and like what that means. And then how do we, reach out and like fill those gaps, and how do we hold our elected officials accountable? So thank you for that. Just thinking about, Miracle, you had talked about, the privilege to be politically aware, and that makes me think about some of the questions that I know DaVonne was gonna ask. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to DaVonne to ask some of her questions that she had.
Thank you. First, thank you all for your input. It's definitely helping me as someone, as Miracle said, just kind of getting into politics. I've listened to it on the news, but actually really getting involved. I feel like I'm at a very, very basic level of it. And of course, what I hear the most about is, of course, the presidential election. That's more so what I know of, as opposed to the local elections, as I've expressed prior to Curt and as to Kiyomi and many others, that just as Miracle also stated earlier about knowing who decides what day you get your trash taken, or just how many days your children will be in school. Those are some things that myself, as well as I do truly believe the Black community just doesn't have education on. And not having that education, of course, you disconnect from the importance of the elections, local or the presidential. So one of my questions, of course, the first one I have for anyone who would like to chime in, is where can you get this information from? Because I do believe, as a mother, these are things I want to instill in my children. And I think Aerion mentioned this, with all voting is local. It's just as important as just regular education, just your financial education. So where can I start, and what information or material can I use to even get that basic understanding of local elections, presidential elections, the verbiage, the language, so that I am informed when I'm listening to all of you speak, as well as my candidates, and put it in my children.
There are some really awesome resources that I send people to. I try to keep resources nonpartisan, so that regardless of who needs the information, you're not like biasing them towards one political party or another. You're just giving them the information. Some ones that I really like are the League of Women Voters. They have some awesome resources. Vote 411 is another one, and Ballotopedia are three that do a great job of like telling you who's on your ballot. I mean, you can even see a sample ballot before you go to vote and know exactly what your ballot's going to look like, who's on it, and then you can even click on each candidate when you see your ballot, and it'll send you to tell you a little bit about them on top of what each office does. So all three of those resources I think are fantastic. They are all nonpartisan, and they are a wealth of information, one-stop shop. In addition to that, I know some like local organizations also do some stuff that's specifically for like our area, and I know that the city paper puts out a voter's guide for each election that I've found to be phenomenal. But the three that I gave, you can literally give to anyone in the country. Those are national organizations that have all of the information in one place.
Yeah, and I would follow up the vote spot, as Bethany called it. When you register to vote, it tells you what your ward is, and it gives you all of your electoral information. And what a lot of people get, like I moved to Pittsburgh, and I was so confused about who represented me, what ward I was in, what district, and everything. And so that will give you your information and how you can look up people that way. In addition, the Pennsylvania Secretary of the Commonwealth / Department of State. It's very different. They give you a list of all of the candidates. So everybody has to register once they're on the ballot. They can give you that information as in regards to what the dates and the deadlines are, the dates to register, when there'll be runoffs, different special elections. And locally, the Allegheny elections division as well. I will give props to Bethany, but in the past 6 months, their data has been up to date. They have graphs, they have information where you can sign up and get alerts. They have press releases, and so they also will let you know what's going on your ballot and your information. So that's really good as well. And then I would say your local political party, once you figure out what some of your issues are, and I tell people, go to your local party's website. So you have the Greens of Allegheny, you have your Democrats, you have your Republicans. I'm not sure if the Libertarians are big here, but if you go to their website, they'll have events, they'll have caucuses, so you can go and you can listen to them talk to figure out what their policies are, what their platforms are going, what platforms they're supporting, why they're not. And the best way to figure out information is to hear people talk about what they believe, and so you can do it that way too. But they'll tell you if it's open to the public or not for their events.
My favorite resource, and I dropped this into the chat, and I believe Kiyomi shared it as well, is The Incline. It's an online news source, and they do every election year, not just presidential, every single year, they do what they call a procrastinator's guide to the election. And I just pulled it up just to confirm. And I mean, they have every single race. They have what that position does. So some of them, like Congress, might seem obvious, but they will tell you what the the Attorney General does. They will tell you what a council member does. They'll tell you what a controller does. They then tell you who the incumbent is, give you a short bio on them, tell you who's running against them, give you a bio on them. They connect to all their social media platforms. They list their endorsements, and then they'll include something like a notable quote from the individual. So it's a good starting place to just kind of get an overview of the landscape. And then for each race, you can just kind of click through and scope out each individual candidate's social media presence and see what they're saying, what their platform is, learn a little bit more about them that way. But I mean, there are tons of local news sources that do something very similar. I mean, Post-Gazette will do endorsements. As Bethany said, City Paper does something very similar to The Incline. So the local news sources are usually pretty good at doing this every election year, not just in presidentials either.
If I could just put a real quick bow on this, I also will add that all the resources that everyone mentioned really play well with voting by mail, in the sense that because you actually get your ballot before election day, you have time to actually look at everybody that's on your ballot to then go ahead to these resources to go look up more information about them. I know there's many people, and myself have been guilty of this, where I've gone in on election day and looked at the ballot for the first time, and I'm like, who is this? What do they stand for? And you don't really have time in that moment to really pull out your phone and really Google who they are, what their platform is. So being able to vote by mail, get your ballot a little bit earlier, gives you a little bit more built-in time to do your actual research and go to these resources that everybody mentioned.
Thank you all. I'll be reading a lot and hopefully I'll be just as well versed as everyone on this panel tonight. But I also wanted to segue into, we mentioned the Electoral College earlier. We keep hearing this Electoral College, and I just wanted to know if like I said, anyone can chime in, is what is it, as well as how does it affect us and why was it started? I'm hoping that you all have this answer because that is a big thing that I run into as to why people don't vote in the presidential election, because they feel as though the Electoral College kind of washes out their vote.
I can start. So this is a really confusing topic, so I'm going to try to explain it like as simple as I understand it in my head, okay? Because that's how I like to learn things. So the Electoral College is 538 electors, okay? So now we're gonna get to what electors are. So in order to win president, and you'll see this on election night, and remember, this is only for the presidential election. We do not use the Electoral College for any other office aside from the presidential election. So if you're watching the results come in on a presidential election night, which now could be a presidential election week based off of mail-in voting, so be prepared for that too, you'll see them counting to 270. So 270 is how many electoral votes a presidential candidate needs to be declared the winner, right? 538, 270 is the majority of 538. So really what electors are is they are, whenever you cast your vote as a person, what is supposed to happen is that whoever, each state has a certain number of electors that are assigned. So each presidential candidate picks their electors for each state. So if you vote in Pennsylvania for the Democratic presidential nominee, you're actually voting for the Democratic presidential nominee's chosen electors, as if that isn't confusing enough, right? So when you cast your vote, that is really what you're doing. So then after the election, all of the electors get together to cast their ballots for whatever candidate they're representing, right? So Donald Trump picks his electors, Joe Biden picks his electors, and based off of the popular vote, assigns electors. So now different states have different rules. For example, some states have the rule where if 50% of the popular vote goes to one candidate and 50% goes to the other, then the number of electors are split in half as well. Other states have winner take all, and that's the majority, a winner take all scenario, where whoever wins the popular vote of the state wins those electoral votes for their candidate. So if Joe Biden gets the majority of votes in Pennsylvania, then Joe Biden gets all 20 of Pennsylvania's electoral votes. So now what people have been hearing about a lot lately is that some states do not have a law that says that this is how it has to happen. So what folks are worried about currently is, hey, this state doesn't force the electors to go to the popular vote winner. And if y'all remember, if you follow along to presidential elections, often the popular vote winner isn't who ends up as president. Donald Trump lost the popular vote by what, like over 2 million votes, and is still our president. 3 million, is that what it was, Miracle?
I'm gonna say it was 3, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, so 3 million less people, 3 million fewer people voted for Donald Trump than Joe Biden, yet than Hillary Clinton. 3 million fewer, and yet Donald Trump won the presidency. That's because of the way electoral votes are really what's used. So if you're up 3 million in the popular vote at the end, but you don't hit that 270 electoral votes that you need to actually win the presidency, you can lose, even though you had more votes. And so that's what a lot of people are talking about right now, especially in a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where the Republicans control the legislature. And so at the end of the day, there could be, and it's not just in Pennsylvania, there are other situations like that as well, whether it's a Democratic legislature for the state or a Republican legislature. If it came down to it, and there was cries of fraud, which I promise you there will be regardless of who wins, right? If it comes down to it, will the state's legislature give the electoral votes to the candidate that won the popular vote in their state? Or will it become a political thing and they'll just give it to whatever the candidate is for the political party of the majority of the state legislature? So I hope I broke that down very well. But yeah, basically an electoral college is a set of people called electors. They're not me and you. We're not fancy enough for that. They're not me and you. We are the voters who vote for a presidential candidate who has chosen electors to represent them.
So
Everybody else, did I do an okay job with that?
And then
Confusing, and most people do not understand it. So if you don't understand it, you're not alone.
listen, every election, me and my friends are there trying to like do math. I'm horrible at math, but I also tell people like in a different set of facts and opinions than our elected official who runs the country. I believe in systemic racism. And the Electoral College, like 95% of all systems created in this country have anti-Blackness at their core. It is what it is. So if you're not going to vote because you think the Electoral College is racist, then you might as well move somewhere else, because everything in this country is somewhat racist and anti-Black. So, but it's just a voting mechanism. It's also going back to like your civics class, reminding you that America is a democratic republic. It's not a democracy. It's not a republic. It's a mix of both of them. So the Electoral College is the protection put in place by our founding fathers to make sure that, you know, the tyranny doesn't really win out. And so that's how kind of like the ruling class basically gets to have their say. Another reason to get involved in the electoral process, your electors are traditionally party officials, people who have, you know, worked their way up in various political parties. So the head of the party, the star volunteer, the top donor, different things like that. Those are your electors. And again, if you're looking to get involved in politics, you can Google who these electors are, see if they'll be see if they'll mentor you, see if you can volunteer with campaigns, that type of information as well to get more involved. But the Electoral College is just, it's kind of like how the football teams to figure out who's going to be on the different Rose Bowls and stuff like that. It's the same process. Everyone gets upset every year. But that's basically just how the fans don't get to have their complete say. So that's basically what it is.
maybe the
Thank
one.
you.
Maybe the
I'm
one,
sorry.
Maybe the one rainbow in all of this is if if certain people get to 270 or more, it could stop us from having to deal with the whole process, and it could be over. Yeah.
You are such an optimist.
Well, I thank you all for that.
For abolishing the Electoral College. That's really what I would propose. One vote, one person, right? That's how it is for every other race. Why isn't it good enough for the presidential race? And, you know, Miracle posted a really awesome article that I've actually read before in the chat about the racist origins of the Electoral College. And, you know, she touched on that as well. An argument that I hear often for why there's the Electoral College is a state like, I don't know, what's a good example? Montana. I don't want to like offend anybody from Montana, but you know, like a state where there's not a lot of people, like it would give California and New York like overwhelming say of who should be president, because that's where like the population is. And a presidential candidate would never go campaign in like Idaho or Montana, because like, hey, if I can win California and New York, why do I need Montana and Idaho? So that's why establishment folks will explain to you why the Electoral College exists. I personally think that if there's the majority of people are in California and New York, then maybe those majority of people should be the ones having a say in who's president, right? And they shouldn't be. It's the same, in my opinion, something that I also think has racist origins, is the concept of every state in the United States having 2 senators. So regardless of what your population is, if you have tens of millions of people, or if you have, you know, tens of thousands of people in your entire state, you still get 2 U.S. senators that represent your state. I think that's very unfair. I have read about the racist origins of that as well. And again, it plays into the same argument that I just presented you about it. But just something to think about.
Well, I thank you all for that information. It was a lot, but it definitely helped me understand what it was a lot more. And I would like to pose this, of course, after having that discussion. As the Black community, many non-people of color feel like their vote don't count. And I can say as a Black woman, it makes me feel even more so that my vote don't count. And then hearing the information about the Electoral College. But I wanted to know, how can I encourage more Black people to vote and know that them voting makes a change in their community and actually gives them a voice. How can I speak to the Black community in how important this is? I know how to do it with everyone else, but I just feel like it's different for the Black community.
Can I just quickly speak to that? I think that one of the things that Barack Obama said when he first became president was, okay, now make me do my job. And I'll never forget him saying that, because I was like, you're right. That's my job. My job is to make you keep all those promises, or keep as many as possible. And so where people of color, or, you know, African Americans are concerned, I think it's really important. It's incumbent upon folks who are already involved to continue to put education out there. If we don't know what to do, we won't do it, period, you know? And that's the thing. So it's really important to educate as many people as possible. They need to know, how can you put pressure on your elected officials? How can that pressure finally get to, you know, to the White House somehow, you know? We need, I think if people believed that could actually happen, they might get more involved, because at that point, it might not matter so much who's president if we could actually get, you know, get the kind of pressure that makes people do what they promised, you know, or makes people think about or care about those who have been generationally discriminated against. So I'll kind of leave it there.
I'll quickly just jump in. You know, the way to gain, I think I heard a quote, was like the way to gain a reasonable right to something is not by voluntarily throwing it away, right? And so when you throw away your right to vote, many elected officials are responsive to that, right? And you won't see too many elected officials publicly say this, but many of them, when they do their campaigning, they look at areas and pockets of their district that actually turn out the vote, and they give attention to that because they know those are the people who are critical to them keeping their job, right? As an elector, as somebody who votes, you have the ability to hire and fire the people who are in office, right? And so if somebody's running for office and they know this neighborhood doesn't have a high voter turnout, it's not likely they're going to go and tell you and talk to you or tell you what their platform is, and vice versa. Once they're in office, they're not likely to respond to your concerns or your issues, right? They're going to respond to the neighborhoods that they know are going to vote for them because they need to keep their job. And so when you don't end up voting, you actually do yourself and your community a disservice, because it doesn't incentivize elected officials to be as responsive to your neighborhood, your community as possible. And, you know, again, to an earlier point about people being disappointed in who's on the ballot, and that using that as justification for not voting, you know, I always tell people, if you don't like who's on your ballot, run for office yourself. It's not always as simple as that. You know, there's a lot of nuance to it, but I know Bethany can, you know, from her experience in running for office and many others, that a lot of people who do run for office do it because they are frustrated with the representation that they're currently getting. And instead of saying, I'm not going to vote, they're saying, you know what, I'm going to actually be the change that I want to see. I'm going to run for office myself.
Yeah, and I always tell people, if you don't think voting matters, go back and look at the massacre that was 2014 and like how that, for like a lot of things, changed the trajectory of our country. Again, keeping this like nonpartisan, but like how when you also, I think a lot of times people, they get disenfranchised, but at the end of the day, it's like how your parents tell you, just because you play a game doesn't mean you're going to win it, right? And if you lose one game and you decide you're no longer going to play, that kind of doesn't make sense. And I think that a lot of times, looking at the history of our country, disenfranchisement came out of safety, right? People were being murdered, bombed, lynched for voting. And so a lot of people said, you know what, in order to protect my family, in order to keep my community safe, we're not going to vote, right? But we're saying now that we have more safety, we have more politicians, we're reclaiming our right to get involved and to vote. And that's why we can't be disenfranchised, because voting for us to get 100 power is a tool of power. And if you don't vote, you're allowing yourself to be ignored and not counted. And so that's why we encourage people to vote, even if it's just for your local races and you're not going to do your federal races. But voting is how we keep people engaged. And also, more importantly, voting is also how we pick jurors for a lot of places across the country and a lot of jurisdictions. So if you are not registered to vote, you cannot sit on a jury. So if you cannot sit on a jury, you can't really talk about the disproportionate amount of people who are impacted in the criminal justice system, because you have an easy way to get involved and you're denying yourself the opportunity for yourself and your fellow community members. So unfortunately, again, it's a system, and no system is going to work perfectly because it's man-made and based on supremacy, but it's a system that impacts our lives. And while we're building a better future, we still have to be involved with the system that we have now. And that's one of the reasons why I tell people and encourage people to register to vote and vote.
I saw Sharon. Did I say
Yeah,
that right?
Sharon, yes.
Sharon, I'm sorry.
To Aerion and Miracle's point, both, it's very good, Miracle. I had forgotten about the selection of jurors by being registered to vote. So I'm glad you brought that out. But we're not picking our Valentine. We're not picking our future spouse or life partners. We're trying to make the best decision that we can based off of this 2-party system or 3-4-party system right now, to have a better life. And so it's when we break it down like that, when we say we need to have juror representation, when we say that we need to be able to vote our conscience on a local level for our judges and for our council people and for our mayors and chief of police, our sheriffs and all that sort of thing. That's very important. And I don't think in the Black community that we think like that. I had an older woman say to us today, Dean was in East Hills earlier today, doing voter registration. And she said that she tells the young guys, if you want to sell drugs, then you need to go and vote on the judges that are going to sit over your cases. And they laugh at her, and that's kind of dramatic, but it's just being relatable, I think, and also breaking it down for people that we need to think about who we elect, even on our local level, for such things as judges, and what's going to happen to our daily lives. Like, let's not look at it as so broad as the presidential election, which is very important. But if you bring it down to the local level so that people can see how it impacts them every day, I think it's better for them to see that. It's better for them to understand and be able to connect the dots on that.
Thank you so much. Sharon, you definitely said the one word I was looking for when asking that question was the relatableness of it. And you all definitely made me feel more empowered in if I ever come up to that question, someone asking how does it matter, their vote matters in the Black community. But just even getting into like Aerion said, about having the candidates come and talk to us and listen to what our issues are. I think that speaks volumes. If no one's voting, then you don't care. And we care. And I just thank you all for that information, taking the time out to even answer my questions, even about the Electoral College, as a little bit confusing as it is. But I definitely feel more empowered. So I thank you guys.
So I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Certainly, this has been incredibly enjoyable. I've learned so much. I'm sure so many of our viewers have learned a lot, and I could probably be here listening to y'all talk about voting for another hour, but y'all have probably been on Zoom meetings for a long time today, and let's get you, back home and back to dinner. So I just want to end on, if everyone doesn't mind, maybe just thinking about like what they would like to close on, sort of like their last thoughts, last little points of importance that they want to put out there. Certainly, again, if you have any events that are coming up around voter engagement or education, please plug those in during this point too. And I know for me, some of the points that I wrote down, a lot of them actually came from Aerion, so thank you so much for these. I'm just thinking about when we talked about, throwing away, like don't throw away, those opportunities and those things that you can fight for, and that, all politics is local. And one of the things that really stuck with me too is thinking about that voting is essential to human progress. And there was a census panel that I was able to be a part of a couple weeks ago. And one of the speakers, she talked about that voting or being involved in the census, which today's the last day for the census, it comes down to, our dignity, and it comes down to whether we feel that we are worthy enough and what we feel our lives are worth. And that's really kind of what sums up voting for me. So yeah, I so appreciate all of your time and being here and your leadership. But yeah, if we don't mind, we'll just go around, and any closing statements that you would like to make would be great.
I think you took all the closing statements that I was going to make. I always have been all politics is local, right? Everything that affects your life on the day-to-day level happens via decisions that are made by your locally elected officials. School board, borough council members, magistrates, judges are elected. I don't think we talked much about that tonight. Magisterial district judges, court of common pleas judges, statewide judges, but also city council, county council, state rep. We hear so much talk about who's running for president because that's who has the most money to be in your face and in your ears all the time. That's who has the most money to be on your television and advertising on your social media and on the radio and sending mailers to your house. There are 915,000 registered voters in Allegheny County. If you send one mailer out to all of them, you're a county elected official, right? It's going to cost you about $450,000 to send one piece of mail just to Allegheny County. So the races you hear this most about are the ones that have the most money, and that's the federal level. But please don't forget that it's those local level offices that I said are often decided by one vote. People win 4-year terms in a local office with a couple hundred votes total. Also want to remind people that if you want to get involved, find a candidate that you are passionate about. As Miracle mentioned earlier, find a political party that you are most aligned with. Find a nonpartisan organization that's just about voter outreach. I mean, Veeam is here sitting in front of you, a perfect example of someone you can get involved with. If you want to get involved, there are so many ways to do so. And again, Aerion mentioned this earlier. If you are sick and tired of every time you go to vote and never seeing a candidate that really speaks for you, maybe you should think about running for office, because no one is going to give you a seat at the table. Sometimes you have to take your own seat and pull it up to the table yourself to make sure that your voice and the voices of all those in your community are amplified and are heard. So that's what my going away statement is. Vote twice a year. Every election matters. Every vote counts.
It's funny, I was going to say the same thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I used up all my good one-liners. So I'll just say, make sure everybody votes, please.
I will just kind of build off that yes, vote in local elections, vote twice a year, every year. I would just ask folks to think about this. In a presidential election in Allegheny County, we typically get 70% voter turnout. In an off presidential year, we're lucky to get 20%. Think about what the city of Pittsburgh would look like, or Allegheny County would look like, if voter turnout in those off elections was 70%, or even if it was 40%. So it's important, yes, to vote for the president, absolutely. And we feel that profoundly right now, but think about how different this county could be if we had high voter turnout that was equivalent to the presidential races.
And I'll just say, if you are interested in voting, have more information, this weekend in the Hill District, in the Shop and Save, I think it's like 1805 Center Avenue, we are doing a voting pop-up where you can come down and actually cast your ballot. We will have food, music, DJ Jibo. We will have Farouk from One Hood performing. We will have the Flow Bands, or we will be live streaming the Steeler game. We'll have food from Mom Malicious, Caribbean food, vegan food as well. So there's something for everyone. We'll also have vendors. It'll be all outside in the Shop and Save parking lot with the CDC guidelines. The Allegheny Board of Elections people will be on site, so you can drop your ballot off. You can register to vote. They are registering people to vote. And you can talk, you can bring your ballot in if you have questions about your ballot. If you think you have the wrong ballot, if you think that you may have not closed it right with the secrecy envelope, whatever has you, you can bring it there. They'll help you. They'll print out a new one on site. If you know people who aren't registered, you can bring them down. We'll also have swag and giveaway to give away, and everything is free. So come out. We'll be at the Shop and Save parking lot 9 to 5 on Saturday and 11 to 7 on Sunday. And that's with the PA Black Voters Matter Coalition, which is One Hood Power, I think Black Voters Matter Fund, Alliance for Police Accountability, the Antoine Rose Family Foundation, Kim Williams, Dr. Goddess, a whole bunch of people will all, we're all part of this coalition. Project Matters, uniting, so please come out. And I believe Saturday evening, Project Matters is having a ball. So if you go to their social media, follow them. If you want to dress up, come out, or go on, sit on Zoom and watch people vote. You can do that as well. So there's some election events happening this weekend.
Beam will also be on site this weekend at the Satellite Center on Center Avenue at the Shop and Save. We are doing the voter registration there. Also, I want to mention that we have a ride to the polls. So if you need a ride to the polls on November 3rd, you may call 412-242-1998. That's 412-242-1998. And you can schedule 24 hours in advance to get a ride to your polls. It's especially important for our seniors and those that are disabled or differently abled to get a ride to the polls. So you can just call and schedule. And if you have any questions on voter registration or rides to these satellite areas, the satellite centers, you can call Beam Pittsburgh at 412-465-0551. That's 412-465-0551. Now, Beam is not riding to the polls, to the satellite centers. However, we will connect you with the resource that is doing that work.
Yeah, and just to follow up, I think BPEP, the Black Political Empowerment Project, as well as PA voters, are actually giving people rides to the satellite sites. And so is Take Action Mon Valley. So if you contact those organizations, I know there's lift codes, different things that they can give you so you can vote too.
Okay, how about DaVonne? Is there anything that you would like to say in closing?
Just thank you all for coming, and like I said earlier, just making me feel more empowered. So I know many attendees, anyone who participated on Facebook will feel that way. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. I hope you all continue to do the work, and I look forward to speaking with you all in the future, and hopefully just get way more involved in the voting process.
Okay, thank you all so much for being here. We at Center of Life and just here in Hazelwood, we so appreciate all of your leadership and your time today and just speaking about these issues. So yeah, thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.